Before all this Charlie Kirk stuff, Zoran Mamdani was getting a lot of flack from leftists for going on MSNBC and backtracking on his use of the phrase globalize the intifada, saying that he was capitulating to Zionism, to Zionist propaganda, to Zionist talking points. I want to respond to that. I see this as nothing more than a New York City mayoral candidate listening to the concerns of his potential constituents.
Has your personal views on the phrase of global intifada changed since you've been running for mayor? Do you understand those that see it in a more threatening way than saying, I'm just not going to police other people's language?
Yes, they have. And you know, when we won the primary election, I said on that stage that I know that millions of New Yorkers care deeply about what happens in Israel and Palestine, and I'm one of those New Yorkers. And I commit to reaching even further to understand disagreement, to wrestle with the complexities of those differing viewpoints, because what this city deserves is a mayor that looks not only to represent the close to 600,000 New Yorkers that voted for me, but rather the 8.5 million people that call this city home. And in the meetings that I have had since that moment, I've met with Jewish elected officials, with rabbis, with community leaders, and there was one rabbi that spoke to me about how that phrase, for her, brought back memories of bus bombings in Haifa, of restaurant attacks in Jerusalem. And I knew that from what she was sharing with me that she had a fear, as she said, that could come home to New York City. And so in having that conversation with her, I knew that the gap between the intent that I have heard some New Yorkers share with the use of that language of calling for the end of the Israeli occupation of Palestinian land was disconnected from the impact it was having in that same conversation I was having with that rabbi. And so I have said, after having that conversation, that this is language I would discourage.
This is what progressives do. When we get new information, when we get new perspectives, we update our understanding. This is what he did. He listened to concerns of his potential constituents and he adjusted. That's progress. That's how we make progress. A lot of people keep using this phrase because it directly translates to shake off or brush off a larger power. It represents the rebellion, the revolution of Palestinian people against their oppressors, against Israel. And it even was originally chosen to mean aggressive, nonviolent resistance. That is what largely characterized the first intifada. It was largely a nonviolent resistance. The problem is the phrase continued to be used during the second intifada, which was characterized by violence towards civilians, violence towards Jewish people just for being Jewish, bus bombings. And so when this phrase continues to be used through the second intifada, you have to acknowledge that the phrase's meaning has changed. This is no different to me than someone flying the Nazi flag and you going, well, what the fuck, dude? You can't fly that. The Nazis flew that flag. And them saying, well, actually, the swastika originally meant peace and love or whatever it was. The meaning of the symbol and the phrase has changed over time as it got used in different situations. And personally, I don't love the phrase because of this. But if you insist on continuing to use it, clarify what you mean by it. That you're not talking about violence against civilians, that you're not talking about violence against Jewish people just for being Jewish, that you're saying you support Palestinian liberation, that you support their rebellion against their oppressors. And you might acknowledge that Palestinians under international law have a right to violently resist their oppressors, which is not civilians, it's not Jewish people, it's the IDF. But you also, if you're going to use international law as a guide to morality, you also have to acknowledge that it is a war crime, it is a violation of that same international law to commit violence targeting civilians, which is what the second intifada was characterized by and what October 7th was. You can't pick and choose which international laws you like, and then for the ones you like, say, well, we're using international law as a guide to morality. You have to acknowledge that there are people who will use the phrase as a way of justifying violence against civilians and against Jewish people just for being Jewish. And that's bad. And if you continue to use the phrase without explaining it, those people will feel emboldened because they will find other people using the phrase. Zoran Mamdani is acknowledging this, and he is listening to the Jewish people that live in New York City, to address that. Don't get me wrong, I'm in favor of Palestinian liberation, but we will never get that if we just don't listen to Jewish people expressing concerns about these kinds of things. We will never get there if we don't listen to and help unpack and disassemble existing beliefs that were probably taught to a lot of people by Zionist propaganda. You can't, in one breath, talk about how widespread Zionist propaganda is among Jewish people and then turn around and say, well, we don't have to engage with Zionist propaganda because it's propaganda, it's not reality. If you don't engage with that, they will continue to believe that. You have to talk to them and say, I hear you. I hear your concerns. And if you're still worried that he's capitulating to Zionism, since this interview, he has still pledged that he would order NYPD to arrest Netanyahu if he sets foot in New York City.